Hey everyone, I am Justin and that is Kyle, and we are the Fantasy Football Upside. Today is our last day for our too early rankings iteration for wide receiver. In the previous 2 episodes this week, we've run through our wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2 rankings. You might be able to click at the top or take a look at our description. You'll find the these links in there. And today we are finishing up wide receiver 3s. So we're going to go through 25 to 36. We're answering who you should aim for in those middle rounds of your draft to fill out that starting lineup. Kyle?
All right, before we get started, though, make sure that if you're interested and you want to keep getting this sort of content, hit the subscribe button and turn that bell on for notifications. And, get the best fantasy football information that you can so you can dominate your league this year.
Yep.
And don't forget to like this video as well. We try to upload every Tuesday and Thursday with special videos on Fridays potentially. Like this one that you're watching today was uploaded on a Friday. And that's just our summer schedule. We'll have more videos on a higher rate schedule once season comes, and once the preseason starts kicking off, we'll have hopefully 5 days a week and maybe even some live video on Sundays before before football games start, so we can talk about injury reports, injury impacts, weather, all that sort of fun stuff. But first, we're going to dive headlong into a little bit of news, try to get through that quickly here so we can get into the meat of things that you're here for, right?
Yep.
So the Philadelphia Inquirer is reporting that the Eagles have shown interest in LaShawn McCoy and have even made an offer to Devonta Freeman. Now, I don't know, and they didn't say whether or not that offer to Devonta Freeman is still outstanding, or whether that actually came before the Seahawks made an offer to him that he also turned his nose up at. So he's said that he's talking about sitting out for the year.
Right.
Why, I don't know, but apparently it's going to look a little rosier for him, right?
Talk about leverage.
Oh yeah, wonderful leverage. Really, 2 really bad years and then nothing, and then you need me. All right, and then so anyway, LaShawn McCoy is I think the more interesting figure here. He played for 6 years in Philadelphia to start his career. But it doesn't look like he's been made an offer just yet. But obviously, mutual interest would exist if this sort of news is getting out there. I think that McCoy would be the better signing for fans of Miles Sanders in the fantasy realm, because I think it's likely that Miles Sanders would maintain a high level of productivity or volume of touches available to him, and that McCoy is unlikely to steal that stuff from him. He might get a little bit of the goal line work, but Miles Sanders is a strong enough guy, big enough guy that it's potential that he wouldn't lose that goal line work. So, I look at this as kind of like an interesting thing that's happening potentially. As a Miles Sanders former owner, it's interesting to me, but I think it's also a question about this muddled backfield. So we can go ahead and move on. What do you got for us, Justin?
Well, ESPN came out with an article today. Pass interference replay rule is finally dead. And I say finally, it only took 1 year.
Well, it was already dead. I mean,
it was dead, but
preseason last year, it was apparent it was dead.
It was dead. But I found this kind of funny. Former football or NFL player Troy Vincent, he's the NFL Executive Vice President of Football Operations, said it failed miserably. So pretty honest feedback from a guy that high up in the NFL. And he's like, failed miserably. So
I'd really like to get an idea of what really played out there, why that happened that way, right?
Right.
I would love to know what happened behind the scenes there that caused, who's at fault really for the way that played out. That would be an interesting little autopsy to have happen on that. I would
also like to find out if maybe we could do a little research and see okay, how many times was it reviewed? How many times was it clear that it was pass interference, or they didn't reverse it or anything like that? And did it really help anything? I mean, obviously as an NFL fan, I could tell it did not help at all.
Well, there were 2 or 3 times that there was an actual call in from the booth where they decided to call interference from the booth, basically, that they forced a replay to occur
right
on interference. And and they were situations that weren't they weren't clear interference. I'm saying this as a Packers fan, obligatory Packers fan drop, right? It
Right.
seems like I say it every episode, but they got a touchdown last year because pass interference was called down to the field against the defense away from where the ball was thrown. I mean, it's just, and it wasn't an obvious pass interference either. So it was just like this wild call. It didn't make any sense to me. So, yeah. All right. So we've got a special little treat here on Friday. We're going to jump into a new segment that we're calling the Big Bust Watch. So it's the guys who are going to bust for you in the first 2 rounds. The big busts. Oh, that's not working there. Oh boy. So
we'll fill it in.
Sound drop's not working there. That's okay. I don't know
You'll
what's
edit
happening.
it in.
Yeah, I'll have to figure that one out. But all right. So it's who do you see currently sitting in the top 2 rounds of ADP?
Mm-hmm.
We've got some crazy ADP going on right now.
Yeah.
Early years. So early in the year.
Right.
Who do you see in the top 2 rounds in early ADP as being the biggest risk of turning into a bust this year? So what do you have, Justin?
Well, I think we talked about this guy in the first episode, and his name is Nick Chubb. And I don't think it's because of how good he is. It's just because of the fact that, maybe this does turn into a 50-50 share when it comes to him and Kareem Hunt with Cleveland. So, I mean, if it turns out to be that 50-50, it would be hard for Chubb to produce the fantasy numbers needed to justify the cost. And I just checked right before we got on, and he's going at 3rd pick in the 2nd round. I mean, you still want to try to get a low-end wide receiver 1 there. But if you're going to have 50-50 share, that's going to be tough to do. What do you think?
Yeah, that's rough.
It is.
3rd pick, 2nd round's a little tough. I think
a little rich.
Yeah, it's a little rich, but at the same time, if Kareem Hunt doesn't steal a ton from him, let's say Kareem Hunt manages to get 100 to 110 carries, and that offense is clicking at a high rate of plays, I like Kareem Hunt, I like Nick Chubb then in the 2nd round. I like him as a back end RB1.
Yeah.
In that regard, but last year he was a little boom or bust. So the addition of Kareem Hunt is not, full time is not going to assist there for him. So We'll see.
What do you got?
I am, this. I'm not a huge fan of Joe Mixon. I've had him on my teams before, but there's just too many questions surrounding that offense in my mind. Did they upgrade the offensive line enough to actually be effective for him? Will Joe Burrow show up, right away and relieve 8 men in the box issues for him?
Mm-hmm.
And can Mixon stay healthy as more of the touch volume falls on him? These are all big questions that I'm really concerned with where that's going to go eventually. So he's going in the I think in the back end of the 1st round right now, early part of the 2nd round, and it's just too rich for my blood. But I could see him busting out.
Yeah,
that offense could just sputter, and it's Cincinnati. It's basically any team in Ohio, right? Avoid. All right.
Real quick, just to jump in on that. I was a Joe Mixon, owner last year, and boy, was he frustrating that first part of the year, but he did turn it on there towards the second half. So I'm hoping for a turnaround for Joe Mixon, but I mean, you hit it right on there. Ohio players, they're tough to trust, man. They really are. They really are. I mean, first pick of the second round is still pretty rich for him, but I mean, the potential is still there. So we'll see.
Yeah.
So, all right, we can dive into our rankings now.
Let's do it.
We are finally at the last 12 of our wide receivers. And so we've got, these are the last startable players, basically, that you should be considering as regular starters. These guys might be a little more spot start type of guys. And hopefully you're able to have stocked up on ones and twos, because, other people are overpaying for some of the guys who should be in wide receiver 3 territory.
Right.
So as always, non-PPR league, 12 teams, and running weeks 1 through 16. I also want to mention these are not dynasty rankings. These are also not keeper rankings. These are redraft rankings only.
We'll get to those rankings moving forward. I think we're going to set up some weeks where we get into the keeper rankings and dynasty rankings and everything like that. So, we wanted to start off on non-PPR. So, all right, Kyle, to get it started off.
We got number 20. Number 25 on our list. First wide receiver 3 for us. We have terrible Terry McClaurin.
Terrible Terry.
No,
McClaurin.
Not terrible. Well, there was terrible Terry Tate. I don't know if you remember the Office linebacker commercials.
Yeah.
From back in the day. So it's terrible Terry McClaurin. But no,
what do you got for ADP real quick before I get going?
ADP on Fantasy Football Calculator right now has him as wide receiver 30.
Okay.
Pick 5 of the 6th round.
Okay. So, we have him at 25, so we're not too far off. It's not terrible Terry for me. It's Scary Terry. I believe that is his nickname. So he actually had a pretty good rookie year. I mean, all things considered, came out of Ohio State. He's a 3rd round pick. I mean, he was most likely undrafted in your fantasy leagues. So, and when I say that, I think he was way up there on the list of preseason drafts, rankings, and everything. So, but after that first week, man, he was probably one of the hottest waiver wire ads. I mean, week 1, 5 catches, 125 yards, 1 touchdown. Yeah, people probably added him. So he actually ended up finishing as the 22nd best wide receiver in fantasy. Like I said, kind of a shaky offense. Dwayne Haskins was in there. Case Keenum was in there as their quarterback. So there's bound to be a little inconsistency, and that's what we saw. He did finish 21st in red zone targets, which is good. That was at 14 total. I assume moving forward he's still going to get those. I mean, this team is devoid of some offensive talent, offensive skill players. There's not much there. Darius Guice is always hurt.
Devoid of everything.
Yeah, they really are. Well, defensive line. I would say that, but that's not what we're talking about here. So
no,
I'll get back to offensive skill players. I mean, Darius Guice has flash, can't stay healthy. Adrian Peterson, he's going to have a walker soon. You know what I mean? It's just there's not much there. That also kind of could work out in his favor. I mean, should probably still get a heavy dose of targets. 93 last year. I'm projecting for quite a few more. I'm wanting him to get about 125. So one last thing on him. He led his team in 10 of the 16 games in receiving yards. So I think he's the number one target there. No other tight end's going to take it. No other running back's going to take those targets. So I got him at 24. You get him at 25. What do you think of Scary Terry, Kyle?
He's somebody I could see fall. Yeah, he's somebody I could see falling back from where I have him ranked. That offense is just absolute garbage. And he should have led 10 of the 16 weeks at least.
Yeah.
He's 25. He's entering year 2. And really, when you boil down his stats, he actually last year was pretty much middle of the road wide receiver 3, with a few stats and performances that fell in wide receiver 2 territory.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as the stats that really matter, he wasn't there. I think he's got name cachet that's going to get him selected ahead of where he's falling right now. I think, he's in the 6th round right now.
Yeah.
I see him climbing into the 4th round, and that's just that is a price I am not willing to pay, especially for this guy. If I can get him as a wide receiver 3, where I've already got 2 solid guys, and I'm pulling him up, I'm getting him in the 6th or the 7th round, I think that's appropriate. But I see him climbing up the ladder there because of the same reasons that you said. I think it just makes him, he's got cachet.
Mm-hmm.
Guy gets a nickname off of week 1, and suddenly, everybody's like, oh, you got to run to the waiver wire and get this guy, and then he really didn't turn in another week that mirrored that, the rest of the season. And so that's very frustrating in my opinion. That's year 1. So admittedly, we've got a lot to see here out of him, but that offense, it's just basura, dude. It is. straight up a dumpster fire. It's trash.
Fun fact.
It tastes like that offense is queso from Chipotle. It's horrible.
Oh,
Yeah.
They failed miserably at first. They're getting better with queso.
Okay, so it's going to be a slight improvement this year, but only slight, because you can only go up from literal garbage laced with lactose.
That was kind of a softball up there for you there, Kyle. Fun fact, Scary Terry McClaurin is from Indianapolis, where I am recording right now, and I actually worked with his dad a little bit. He was at one of the car dealerships I worked at before. So,
yeah.
Up next, number 26. What we got, Kyle?
All right, we got Jarvis Landry sitting at 26 for us. He's wide receiver 24 on fantasy football calculator, and he's sixth pick of 5th round. Mm-hmm. I do want to mention that some of these picks, the way that they can work is they can have more than one sitting at the same pick on fantasy football calculator because their average can be the same as somebody else. Right. So he's this middle of the 5th round. Jarvis Landry. What do you think about him?
All right, we got Jarvis, 3rd year with the Browns. So whenever OBJ, was traded to him, everybody kind of assumed that Jarvis's volume would drop, but Jarvis actually out-targeted OBJ, 139 to 132. I mean, we talked about it before. OBJ struggled, and Landry had one of his better years. So here's a crazy one. He has finished as at least a wide receiver 2 every year for the last 5 years. Only 3 other players have done that, including him: Julio Jones, Mike Evans, Jarvis Landry. So didn't know that going into this. So he did tie for 3rd in red zone targets last year at 21. That's pretty damn good, Kyle, for a slot receiver. So they did add another receiving target in Austin Hooper to go along with David Njoku at the tight end position. So, like I mentioned before, Jarvis is kind of in the slot. Maybe that slot kind of middle of the field is going to get kind of busy in there with those other 2 tight ends. So a lot of mouths to feed. We've mentioned that before in previous episodes. So, but I mean, he does have a good connection with Baker. If you're able to start him as your wide receiver 3, because based on our rankings, he just missed out on wide receiver 2. He's going wide receiver 2 in fantasy football calculator. I'd be super happy starting him wide receiver 3. And I like where he's being drafted. He's always been kind of, undervalued for some reason. I had him at 23. You had him at 28. What do you got?
Yeah, I think he's appropriate as wide receiver 3. His catch totals are really what makes him valuable is his high volume. That's his hallmark. I've had him on teams in the past when he was down in Miami, and he was just a volume monster. And playing with him in a non-PPR league, that's a little frustrating because he wasn't returning great stats for you, but he was getting a lot of targets, a lot of catches, all that sort of thing. He was 12th in receptions, 9th in total receiving yards, and 7th in yards after the catch and red zone catches. But all of his other metrics were just mediocre.
Yeah.
And so, volume is one of those things that you can predict year over year usually, but I look for him to take a little bit of a step back because I think you and I both believe that OBJ is not going to be held back and held down, and that he's going to take the mantle of this offense, and that they're going to want to feature him a little bit more. And he's got a chip on his shoulder. So I see Landry still getting his to a large extent, roughly. I've got him pegged right now, sitting right around 80 catches, 1,000 yards, and 5 TDs. So falling back toward his career averages, but not necessarily all the way back.
Still some good wide receiver 3 numbers right there, I believe.
Yeah, so he's, right now he's sitting in the 5th round. That's a bit early for me for a wide receiver 3. I think there's a lot of value at running back, usually if you're looking at wide receiver 3 in the 5th round. So depending on what is sitting there available for you, maybe the 5th round makes sense, but I would prefer to take a gamble on a guy who might break into running back too. I think a lot of people value those third wide receivers into the 5th round a little bit because they're looking at – there are a lot of people who literally will pick position by position to fill out their starting lineup and then they start going back through and picking for depth.
You're related to one of those, I think.
Yes, I am, absolutely. And that's fine. That's a good strategy. It is.
You do you. Yeah, that's fine.
Well, no, I mean, the argument can be made that, hey, you're targeting always the best value for your starting spot.
Right.
But my suggestion would always be build depth early at the positions that are the most scarce.
Mm-hmm.
And in my opinion, running back is scarce because of the availability of bell cow backs. The guys who are going to carry the load for you are really, really low.
Gone.
And, you know, there aren't that many of them. They go
Yep.
quickly. So you want to grab as many of those guys as you can. And then the other issue, the other target that I always have is wide receiver, because you want to catch as many of those wide receiver ones as possible. And then you want to build depth there with guys who are potentially going to be in your lineup, filling in injury spots, or you know, if you're playing matchups a little bit more, all kinds of things can happen. And so for me, building depth at positions that are scarce is more important than doing the other things. I'm willing to wait on a few spots, because the difference between, we've talked about this, other than the last 2 years, the difference between QB1 and QB12 is usually not very big.
Right.
And so, like,
up until last year, yeah.
Yeah. Well, the year before too, actually, Pat Mahomes had a larger spread between him in second position, which was, I believe, Matt Ryan, than Lamar Jackson did between him and the second position. Even though Lamar Jackson turned in an outstanding
ball down.
All right, so we're going to move on here to number 27. Our number 27 is DK Metcalf. All right, and you want to talk crazy. He's going as wide receiver 13. 11th pick of the third round right now.
What?
Yeah, that's what I said too. Top of the order, wide receiver 2, potentially wide receiver 1. We've got him solidly at the front end of wide receiver 3. I mean, I'm not going to get into what I've got noted here. I'll let you start, and we'll see what you say, because I think you and I are going to say a lot of the same things.
Well, like, whenever I was going through this, I thought, you know, I'll get to my ranking of him here towards the end, but I thought maybe that'll have to change a little bit. But dang, not 13 wide receiver overall. We talked about DK in the last episode, I believe. It was basically just talking about how draft pundits, you know, they underestimated how polished his route running actually was last year. So he's definitely got that going for him. He did finish as a 32nd best wide receiver last year. He topped 60 yards in 9 different games, ranked 10th in the year. 15 red zone targets, tied him for 14th in the year, which, I mean, that makes sense. I mean, the guy is a freaking Greek god playing wide receiver. So he looks like a dominant wide receiver. But crazy thing about those 15 red zone targets is he only came down with 4 of them. So makes me kind of wonder why that was of such a low completion percentage. But he has wide receiver 1 skill set and attributes, and he could develop into that with a little bit more, you know, seasoning as he goes. I mean, this doesn't count for fantasy football, of course, but I mean, hell, he put up 160 yards against the Eagles in the playoffs. I mean, that's a rookie record. So one other thing with him, he's had injury concerns in the past. At Ole Miss, he had neck issues. He was out multiple games. And even last year, like 2 weeks headed into the season, he had his knee scope. So I think he probably fell in some drafts. And, you know, if you picked him up, you probably did okay with him. So my rank, 30. Your rank, 22. We're nowhere near that fantasy football calculator of 13, bro.
Yeah.
What do you got?
I'm a little higher on him, I think, than you are for
a
few reasons. So, yeah, he only came down with 4 red zone touchdowns, right? But he had 7 receiving TDs. So he's scoring from outside of the red zone.
Right.
He was 13th in total TDs, total receiving TDs in the league. But he was also 6th in drops. So I expect both of those numbers to actually travel back towards the league average. So I expect his total TDs probably to drop a little bit, but you're going to get him closer to 5 or 6 TDs for the year probably. But I would also look to see his drops, drop as well, right? So I would look for both of those things to run back towards the average a little bit as he enters his only second year in the league. and then expect an upward trend for targets, yards, and opportunity in general, I think he's primed for a good year. I don't have him better than a wide receiver 2. You've got him solidly in the middle of wide receiver 3.
Mhm.
I'm comfortable with him in the wide receiver 3 range. He finished there last year. He's got Tyler Lockett ahead of him.
Yeah.
I would look to target him in the 5th or 6th round. But as a late 3rd rounder, I'm absolutely going to miss out on him, and I'm not going to feel sorry for him.
No.
You can forget that he's the you can't forget that he's the wide receiver 2 on that team.
Mhm.
He's not going to supplant Tyler Lockett this year. He's just not going to. He does have some real visible talent and potential, but I just don't see it getting there this year.
Right.
Drafting him like he's a borderline wide receiver 1 is not a smart move. Treat him like a wide receiver 3 with some wide receiver 2 upside. That's really what you should look at. All right, so let's move on here. We've got AJ Green coming in at number 28. This one actually, for me, was a little surprising where we ended up with him. I'd have to look at my rank. I'll let you talk about him.
Yeah.
A little surprising. Just, there's a lot of question marks hanging out there.
Right. What is fantasy football calculator got him at for his
I'm
ADP?
sorry. They've got him listed as wide receiver 23, 5th pick.
Okay.
5th round.
5th pick, 5th round.
Yep.
Okay. So yeah, AJ Green of the Cincinnati Bengals. I mean, we like to say Bengals, but it's the Bengals. So, I mean, you may not heard of him last year because, well, he missed the entire year last year with an ankle injury. And that was just kind of a weird injury, Kyle. Like, they just kept talking about, oh, he'll be back. He'll be back. Well, he never came back. So durability has been kind of a concern. It's true. That was kind of the Andrew Luck of a couple years ago.
Ain't nobody buying their merchandise, so
No.
you got to sell tickets.
Right. No, that does make a lot of sense. So he has been he's been banged up, quite a bit here the last couple of years. So of course, the reports always come out, here after the season, before the season starts, fully healthy and working hard. That's what Coach Zach Taylor said. So, but truthfully, the last time he was healthy just to begin the season was in 2018, so a couple of years ago, from weeks 1 through 8.
Meanwhile, Dirk Cutter's out there saying, well, I don't know if Todd Gurley's healthy. We only signed him. I'll have to meet him before we can tell.
But someone's being honest.
But Zach Taylor knows that AJ Green is fully healthy.
Oh, obviously.
Yeah.
Probably hasn't seen him, but he's fully healthy. He's ready to go.
Yeah.
Buy these season tickets.
One is operating in a state that has no social distancing, so there's no reason for them not to have interacted. And the other one is the complete opposite, right?
Right.
And yet the situation's flipped. So
right.
Okay.
Well, for AJ, last time he was fully, healthy, it was weeks 1 through 8 of 2018. He was the 6th best wide receiver. So, but the last time he actually played a full 16 games was 2017. And guess what? 6th best wide receiver. So he can perform at a high level, Kyle. It's just, is he healthy? So, I mean, he's got wide receiver 1 numbers when he's playing, when he's active. So, I mean, boomer busts. I mean, this is one of the biggest boomer busts. You might hear him on one of our episodes of Boomer Bust is AJ Green. So he's got a rookie QB. I just talked about the durability issues, age. He's going to be 32 when the season starts. There are some other wide receiver targets there at Cincinnati. Tyler Boyd, John Ross. They just drafted T. Higgins. So there's some guys, some, high drafted guys in the wide receiver room. So, but if he can give you 12-plus games, I know that might be asking much, Kyle. He will outperform this rank, in my opinion. So,
yeah,
I had him at 26. You actually had him at 26 as well. What do you think?
Well, I think that he's absolutely dominant when he's healthy. He's he's 32. Yeah, in league age, that's pretty high, but he's only actually in his 9th year. I'm looking for him to bounce back finally from his injury in 2018, and he was absolutely a beast in 2017. Mm-hmm. And as long as he's healthy and Joe Burrow can handle his job decently, really he should be able to rekindle the results. Yeah, there's a little more competition on that team for catches, but I don't see T. Higgins stepping right in and competing with AJ Green. And
Yeah.
I don't, John Ross is fast, but I think they'll turn him into a gadget a little bit more.
Yeah.
They'll try to. They're not going to turn that offense and focus on him. And Tyler Boyd is what Tyler Boyd is. He's a solid and really good, like wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 in that
Slot
range.
receiver.
Like he's not necessarily going to turn in wide receiver 1 games, whereas AJ Green is phenomenal, just a phenomenal player. The risk here is really that Joe Burrow can't handle the load. But I mean, targeting AJ Green is like a security blanket. So I see
6'4".
this working.
I mean, you just lofted up there.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so I've thought about how I would handle the draft around him. And there's a lot of risk that exists here. So I'd push him back to the 6th or 7th round, but somebody's probably going to grab him in the 5th round in your league. So for me, I'm probably going to end up missing out on AJ Green. But if I'm missing out on AJ Green in the 5th round because somebody grabbed him, I'm probably grabbing somebody with a lot fewer question marks in my mind. And I might even be, able to grab somebody who is going to be a solid starter on my roster at a little higher level. So, we've got him sitting as a wide receiver 3. You might be able to pull a wide receiver 2 out of there as a result of somebody reaching for him in the 5th. So I think he's appropriate in the 6th or 7th round, given what question marks he has to deal with there. Moving on here to number 29, we have DJ Chark. Fantasy Football Calculator has him sitting as wide receiver 18. Again, we have him at 29, and he's going in the 6th pick, 4th round. I mean, you want to talk about what kind of crazy there is on this?
Yeah.
I mean, Minshew mania doesn't extend right to the wide receivers, does it? I mean,
well,
are they wearing the single button velour and sequence outfits too now?
Well, this is another one of those. This is another one of those ones where, after doing some research and digging in, my ranking might change a little bit. So we'll see.
Yep.
But you talked about this, I think, the last episode. You love third-year wide receivers. Is that correct?
I feel like I catch those guys on the verge of having that year that breaks them into the main, the main discussion. Right. I like grabbing the 2nd-year wide receivers as well, who are it's really hard to project those guys out, but you can catch those guys who are on the trajectory upward going into the 3rd and 4th year, I think. So,
well, I might blow your mind here, but so headed into 2019, the fantasy draft season, so Fantasy Pros had him, their final rankings, 74th. So most likely undrafted. And, he finished as the 12th best wide receiver. I did not really know that going into this. So, but here's the thing, though, with most Giants players, there was some consistency issues from week to week. I mean, he had 9 games under 55 yards. Only one of those games did he have a touchdown. So it wasn't like a few 30 yards and a touchdown and still saved you a roster spot. So he tied for 14th in red zone targets with 15. He turned 15 targets into 5 touchdowns. He had 8 total for the year. Pretty dang good for a wide receiver. So just a quick little note, the Jags added Jay Gruden to their coaching staff as offensive coordinator. He came out with the quote, which, of course, offensive coordinator, new team's going to say this. Well, I want to put –
what was the quote? We're looking to bring in Adrian Peterson.
Well, let's see if he gets cut. I don't think he will be, but let's see if Adrian Peterson gets cut in Washington. No, it's one of those ones where, oh, man, this boy's talented. I'm going to get him all over the field. I mean, he had some snaps in the slot last year.
Cut bait.
Yeah, I mean, it's the, I'm in the
best shape of my life type soundbite. I don't buy anything a Gruden says.
Right.
Seriously.
Any Gruden.
Any Gruden.
Right. So, yeah. Jay Gruden's been decent as an offensive coordinator. So, I'm hoping for a progression from Gardner, Tyreek, Minshew. So, I think we both like Minshew. So.
I like Minshew, but I'm also reasonable. I know it's crazy to like him. I like him for what he brings to the league, not necessarily the skills on the field. But
that matters too, I guess.
The field stuff.
Yeah, I guess that matters. But
game days matter every once in a while. I mean, not as much down in Florida, especially in Jacksonville.
Right.
Yeah.
They so the Giants. I mean, they have a few wide receivers on the roster. Actually, I mean, there's no mistaking that Chark is that number one wide receiver for the team. But they have Dede Westbrook, Chris Conley, Keelan Cole. They drafted kind of like that hybrid rookie Laviska Shenault out of Colorado, I believe. I mean, I think he had some rushing, he had some receiving in college. So, I mean, Chark is a definite wide receiver 3 with significant upside potential. So, I got him at 27, and you actually had him at 27 as well. So, I think we're kind of in line. But like I said, maybe changing this one just a bit, moving closer to the season. What do you think on Chark?
Oh, gosh. He did break 1,000 yards last year.
Yeah.
He's competing with Dede Westbrook and Leonard Fournette for targets.
Mm-hmm.
I think he actually lost out to Fournette for targets. Fournette, I think, led the team in targets, actually. So, this offense is only really actually in the upper half of the league for pass plays. So, trying to get this guy into wide receiver 2 territory like he's sitting right now in the ADP, that's outlandish to me, I think. He finished 8th in TDs last year.
Yeah.
And he finished 14th in deep targets. I'm looking for a regression in both areas. I know that Minshew loves to, just huck it and chuck it, right? Yeah. But I don't see Jay Gruden letting Minshew run wild like that this year.
He's still got a little Mike Leach in him. Is that basically what you're saying?
Yeah. Oh yeah. He's got. I think that Mike Leach had Gardner Minshew, like just all of that on him is what it was. I think he's likely to produce at the same pass volume or a tad higher. But I also think that you're going to get a drop in TDs still.
Yeah.
So the value kind of balances out maybe there a little bit, any increase in yardage or pass volume that you might see. I would not pay a 4th round price on DJ Chark, in my opinion. There's too many targets going elsewhere in that offense for me to pay 4th round for this guy. I'd rather hope to see him sitting there in the late 5th, early 6th round. And I might even hope to try to stretch him into the 7th, but I think that his name's too big for that. I think that he's going to end up having a problem with somebody like Dede Westbrook stealing from him in the end, if that happens. So my concern, like I said, there's too many legitimate mouths down there to feed. And he's only really representing a third of a pass offense that's in the middle of the pack.
Yeah.
That to me is not number 18 overall wide receiver. So that's not where we've got him. We've got him at 29. Going here to number 28, we have Deebo Samuel.
Oh, this is number 30. Deebo Samuel.
I'm sorry. 30 Deebo Samuel. I
You're
don't know
good.
why I said 28.
You're good.
And he is our wide receiver. I'm sorry. He's Fantasy Football Calculator's wide receiver 16. He's the 4th pick of the 4th round.
Can you repeat that for me, Kyle?
Yeah. I don't know if I want to. That's dirty pool, right? He is the wide receiver 16.
16.
4th pick of the 4th round. Deebo Samuel.
All right. Well, I got
Don't
him.
ask me why.
Yeah. I mean, he was a rookie
All
last
my
year.
opinion still.
Yeah, he was a rookie last year, 2nd round pick. I mean, it took him a little bit to get going in Kyle Shanahan's offense last year. So from weeks 1 through 9, 68th best wide receiver. Not too good. But weeks 10 to 16, decent little sample size. He was the 9th best, Kyle. So, I mean, another cool thing I like about Deebo, for one, I like watching him play just from his blocking as a wide receiver as well. But he gets touches via receiving and rushing. So he had like 150 yards rushing last year and I think like 3 rushing touchdowns. So this is a run-heavy offense. So getting Deebo some of those run sweep, jet sweeps and maybe even some designed runs, that could only help his, floor, I would think, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he has that solid floor. Average depth of target is pretty low, which is not too shocking seeing as who his quarterback is, and that's Mr. Checkdown Jimmy G. So, I mean, Deebo is the best wide receiver on the 49ers team. I don't think that's a question, but the question is he the best receiver of the football on the team? And in my opinion, that's George Kittle.
Yeah.
We'll get to tight ends eventually, and I'll express my love for George Kittle to everybody that will listen. So hopefully I don't have anybody turn off after that. But Deebo finished with 81 targets last year. I just don't know if they're going to throw enough, Kyle, to get to like 100. If he does, then if he can get to 125, I mean, you're looking at high-end wide receiver 2 numbers. But I mean, will they do it? Will Shanahan do that? So I got him at 29. You have him at 32, so we're not too far off. What do you think of Deebo?
Deebo.
Yeah,
Deebo Samuels, right? So I've got a lot of problems with Deebo Samuels. I do. Kittle had 107 targets to Deebo Samuel's 81. You're the wide receiver 1, and you're out targeted. Yeah, rookie year, I get it. But you're out targeted by a tight end. Yeah, Kittle's a phenomenal talent, but you're out targeted by a tight end, and you're not even the number 1 pass option in your offense, but you're the wide receiver 1 on the team. This is a team that turns away from their wide receivers often. Mm-hmm. They had Pettis, who was a success at one point too. He put it all together. Yeah. But he put it all together at the back end of his rookie year. Yeah. And then comes out his second year and he's nothing. Yeah. I don't even know if he started more than 1 game. So, I can give you some stats here on Deebo Samuel. He finished 5th in yards after the catch, 13th in red zone targets, 12th in yards per target, and 6th in catchable passes. So he's thrown to a lot, and they were great catchable passes, but that's because they were all about 2 or 3 yards.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. But he was 12th in yards per target still. So they were decently long targets, but they were all over the middle. But here's where the problem really starts to set in. He was 4th in drops, and he was 3rd in drop rate. So his percentage of his total targets that he dropped were 3rd.
Huh.
That's he was the 3rd highest in the league there. So that's a major problem. He was given a limited amount of opportunity in an offense that doesn't want to throw the ball, and he dropped the ball repeatedly. So that's problematic. I would put that as an asterisk going forward to watch out for this problem. It could manifest into something that's like Chris Carson fumbling.
Right.
It's just a problem that suddenly develops and it won't go away. So other than these stats, actually, he was actually pedestrian. He was pretty mediocre. I wouldn't call it pedestrian because I wouldn't call anybody in the NFL pedestrian, actually. I would just say it was mediocre relative to the rest of the league. The drops might clear up a bit, but I don't expect that this offense is going to throw a lot. They were 29th last year in pass plays, just over 32 a game. It was 32.1 pass plays a game.
Jeez. So are we back in like the 90s or 80s or something?
Dang. Yeah, I mean, well, it's Shanahan. Yeah. So, this is an offense that wants to run, and as a wide receiver 2 behind a tight end, without an offensive wide receiver 1 on this team, without a guy actually qualifying there simply aren't enough passes to get Deebo Samuel to the wide receiver 1 level, and he'll be lucky to get to the wide receiver 2 level, in my opinion. So at his current price, nobody should be willing to pay up. Nobody should. Look for him in the 6th or 7th round. Otherwise, let someone else overpay, and you grab a guy that they passed up and made the mistake passing. So this is just one of those guys that you can let him go, and you can feel absolutely satisfied for it because this is going to be a guy who's overvalued. This is absolutely one of those guys that's going to end up in our overvalued episode. Like, that's
what I was going to say.
Yeah,
one of those guys that might not show. He might show up in that do not draft list. So, I mean, not to mention we didn't even talk about this. I mean, they drafted his clone this year, Brandon Ayuk.
Yeah,
I mean, he's basically built the same way as him. So
well,
it's
but
like,
they did the same thing with Pettis, man. They like Pettis
yeah,
was. I mean, he's a little smaller, but he was a wide receiver one, and then they draft Deebo Samuels, and Pettis is in camp and can't even beat him out.
yeah,
But but that's because they don't want to throw the ball.
right.
They want
Yeah.
guys who are going to block, and then
He does block well.
run. Yeah, but then instead of running a
Don't get fantasy points for that.
yeah, but instead of running like a 4-yard curl like a tight end, they run an 8-yard curl.
Right.
Like that's what they do.
Yeah.
They just run curls and jump cut. So that's that whole offense. All right.
What we got next?
We can move on here. We've got at number 31, we have Tyler Boyd, second Cincy guy in the wide receiver 3 category for us. He is ranking at wide receiver 22, and he's the 3rd pick of the 5th round.
3rd pick of the 5th round, number 22. That is a little stiff for me, Kyle. I mean, even though he did put back-to-back solid fantasy years. So last year he finished 25th, previous year 16th. So, I mean, I guess you get the mean of that. You're pretty close to where he's going right now. But, I mean, that is a pretty good bounce-back years after looking like a kind of a bust those first 2 years in the league. I mean, a 2nd-round pick and didn't do much those first 2 years. So this guy does get the targets, though, man. 148 last year. 108 the previous year. So the only issue with that is I think you and I both can agree that he's going to see a drop in those targets. We already talked about the other guy that's going to be on the outside. AJ Green's going to take some. John Ross is going to take some if he stays completely healthy. We mentioned T. Higgins. I mean, he may not perform right at the beginning, but he'll still take some targets as it goes. So, I mean, here's the thing, Kyle. What do you think? I mean, could he be more efficient now? Because they have some potential outside receivers because
No.
Tyler should live.
He's got a rookie QB. He's got a rookie QB in a new offense.
Yeah. I mean,
no.
So you know how I mentioned the last time AJ Green was healthy, was weeks 1 through 8 in 2018. So they were both on the field at the same time. Boyd was still actually the 11th best wide receiver, and Green was the 6th best. So I know that's a smaller sample size. So
Red rifle.
Yeah, true. But I mean, Joe Burrow, we'll see what he can do. So another issue I have kind of with Tyler Boyd is the low touchdown volume. So I mentioned 148 targets. He only had 5 touchdowns out of that. Seems like a lower number of touchdown percentage. So he has some wide receiver 3 with upside potential, but you mentioned it, kind of dependent on Joe Burrow. And actually, I feel like it depends on the health of the other wide receivers on the roster. I kind of think if you have those guys on the outside kind of taking away that attention, that could help out. So I got him at 32. You got him at 31. What do you think of Tyler Boyd?
I think he's a wide receiver 3, and that's the best you can get out of him. I really do. He had back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons with high targets and reception totals, right? But with the return of AJ Green, those targets and those reception totals are going to drop naturally. So you're going to lose yardage right there, most likely. I don't imagine him suddenly, becoming a yardage monster and highly efficient.
Right.
The low TD totals based on the reception and target totals shows that he's not necessarily a very efficient guy. So you can't hope that he's going to, suddenly change his stripes as a Bengal, right? And that was really bad. I feel a deep sense of shame.
I didn't know you had shame.
Yeah, no, don't worry, I don't. So, they're getting AJ Green back, and they've got a rookie QB. Got this, different coaching staff, all this stuff. AJ Green, like I said before, is going to be a rookie QB's best friend.
Yeah.
And Tyler Boyd might be able to catch the ball, but he's going to not be as efficient with it. He's not going to get the yards after the catch that I think AJ Green will get. And so that rapport is going to develop faster with AJ Green. I'd prefer to get Boyd at the back of the 6th round at the earliest. That's where I've got him. And if
that would be nice. That would be nice.
Yeah, I think that would
back into the 6th round.
I think that's appropriate. I think that's an appropriate spot. If you have to take him in the front end of the 6th round, it's probably not terrible.
Right.
He has produced. He has produced before. But I'm not expecting much more than wide receiver 3 out of him. You might get a few wide receiver 2
weeks. If AJ Green's not healthy the whole year, you might sneak a wide receiver one out.
Right. Yeah,
I mean, the one thing Joe Burrow's got going really for him is that he's super accurate. As a rookie, that could really help him. But I also look at him and say, well, Peyton Manning also threw a lot of interceptions, and he was pretty darn accurate too as a rookie. So,
28. I think
yeah. Well, he had the rookie record at one point. So,
did someone pass him? Was it Jameis? Did Jameis pass him, or is that just recency bias?
I think that's recency bias because
Jameis was the best player on the defending team.
Well, there's only been like two or three other guys to ever throw 30 touchdowns and 30 interceptions or something like that. Some number.
A random number, yeah.
Yeah. And they're Hall of Famers.
And
Hall of Famers and Drew Brees, who is also going to be a Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
So I'm a little higher on Jameis than most people. I think that he's actually better than people think, just because he's been saddled with Bruce Arians' throw it into coverage attitude. So
no risk it, no biscuit. Neither here nor there. What do we got next, Kyle?
All right, we've got our number 32, Michael Gallup. He's coming in at wide receiver 20, pick 12 in the fourth round. So back of the fourth round. I mean, if I can get him in the fourth round, back of the fourth round, I'm not too upset about that. But
okay.
But still, I think that's a little high. We've got him sitting at 32.
Right. So, yeah, that's still pretty stiff for me, Kyle. That's still pretty stiff for back of the fourth round. I mean, okay, third year. We mentioned we like the third-year wide receiver.
Yeah, but you also got Mike McCarthy, right? I mean, that's part of my thought is that you've got Mike McCarthy there. There's going to be some heck of a lot of pass plays going on.
We'll
Not
get
the
some
volume that you want, but high efficiency. I mean, as long as he's not running the friggin' Packers offense from 4 years ago, right?
What's saying that he won't? I mean, they all say that he's changed. We'll see if that actually happens. So, third year, only going to be 24 for the entire year. So he is kind of a younger third-year player. He finished 28th last year. Kind of a good thing to see was whenever him and Amari Cooper were healthy and on the field at the same time. So it's 13 games. He actually outsnapped him and out-targeted him.
That one game that they were both healthy?
13 games. Well, okay. Did I say healthy? Well, okay, they were on the field at the same time. They played at the same time. It was 13 games. So I get what you're saying. Amari was banged up for most of it.
Dude, I almost outsnapped Amari Cooper in some games. I mean, the dude takes himself off the field a lot.
Yeah. So, I mean, back to Gallup. Finished 7th in average yards per catch, 16.8. That's pretty damn good. Biggest issue going into the season, already mentioned it. I mean, Cowboys gave Amari $100 million. You think they're going to throw it to him? I think so. They drafted CeeDee Lamb. I mean, he fell to him at 17. I don't blame, Mr. Jerry Jones doing that. So, so he had 113 targets last year. I think that might be hard to repeat. Randall Cobb is with the Texans now. He had 83 targets last year. Cobb did with the Cowboys. But I think most of those 83 vacated targets are going to go to CeeDee Lamb. I mean, why wouldn't they? So he's got wide receiver 3, potential. He's got the skills for more, but it depends on volume, man. It just depends on what they do. I'm going to revert to you with your Mike McCarthy knowledge when it comes to what they're going to do with him. Is he going to be a wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 3 in their offense? So I got him at 34, and you got him at 29. What do you think?
I mean, I'm a little higher on him because I do see this offense supporting at least 2 wide receivers, and I think that his rapport with Dak Prescott is going to be in his favor. The fact that he has performed is also in his favor. He finished as wide receiver 20 last year in fantasy. If there's anyone likely, in my opinion, to move up the ranks this summer as it wears on, it's actually Gallup. The introduction of Mike McCarthy to the offense, I think Gallup should benefit decently. However, I would expect to see him see a reduction in yards as CeeDee Lamb increases his play time.
Mm-hmm.
CeeDee Lamb is a ready-made starter to some extent. So that is a problem for him. That is going to be the scariest thing. That's why he's a wide receiver 3 in my mind rather than a 2. Yeah. Because if he didn't have these sorts of questions, if he didn't have that competition hanging over his shoulder right there, then I would say he's wide receiver 2. But as it is, I've got him top end wide receiver 3. Depending on what's coming out of camp, I could see him move up. He was a wide receiver he was a wide receiver 1 in numbers based on yards per reception, target, routes run, but he failed to turn that into an elite outcome. Yeah, that was my concern with him. That also could have been just a Jason Garrett problem. So I don't know that Mike McCarthy's going to really be any better in the end than Jason Garrett, because he's running, if he chooses to run the offense that he ran in Green Bay, he's running an offense that was effective nearly 10 years ago, but is phased out league wide.
Right.
And that's kind of what got Garrett in trouble. So that could be problematic. I would likely take him in the 4th round there, but I don't think I'd go any higher than that without more info coming out of the Cowboys camp to indicate that his role is going to allow him to compete for the wide receiver 1 job. Mm-hmm. That's my caution with Amari Cooper, right? Is that Gallup turned in a solid year last year in a lot of ways. And if he continues on that trajectory, he could overcome Amari Cooper, but I still think Amari Cooper is a solid talent. So I don't think that's going to actually be the outcome. So I am willing to take him in the 4th round. But I'm really banking that he's going to get wide receiver 2 if that's what I'm doing. And so, I probably wouldn't want to do it. I'd probably be more comfortable taking him at the back of the 5th round, going into the 6th round in the end. That's where I want to see him. A lot of these wide receiver 3s, that's really where you're hoping to get them, is in the 5th or 6th round.
Right.
If you're trying to stack up on running backs, then really you should be targeting a wide receiver 3 coming into the 6th round, unless you see a wide receiver 2 tumbling down the board who you think you can hold out on even still, and then you can grab them. So anyway, we can go ahead and move on from there. Yep. And we can start talking about Julian Edelman, who we have at number 33. Mm-hmm. He's ranked right now wide receiver 36, 12th pick of the 7th round.
Okay.
And he's 34, entering his 11th year here, man.
So I guess we're not too far off from fantasy football category. It was probably our closest one so far tonight. So, but this is life after hashtag Tommy. You know what I mean? Like, what is hashtag Tuami? Like, what is that going to look like for Julian? We just don't know. He's never played with another quarterback for.
It's not going to look like last year.
Well, I mean, speaking of last year, he finished 10th last year.
Yeah.
I mean, just ahead of Allen Robinson. Yeah, I mean, just look at, he was ahead of Allen Robinson. I mean, last year he got the targets, man, 153. So, I mean, I was just looking at it. If he has a 20% drop in target volume, which would probably happen, he could still finish as a wide receiver 3, which is probably why we have him here at 33. So he saw the second most red zone targets last year, 23. Dude, he's only behind Michael Thomas. I mean, that's not going to repeat itself.
If you look at his numbers across the board, they were all crazy high. Yeah. And it's because they had nobody else to throw the ball to.
Yep. That's my next point is there's like unproven pieces on the Patriots. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
N'Keal Harry, pretty damn disappointing as a rookie. Mohamed Sanu, they traded for him for a 2nd round pick, I believe. And I mean, he didn't do anything. So he is, I would say he's going to be a really good security blanket. I think we mentioned security blanket earlier in the episode. So, I mean, is it going to be for Jarrett Stidham or my man Brian Hoyer? We just don't know. I mean, he is kind of he's too good of a route runner in the slot to not get that volume. So
yeah,
he's a wide receiver 3 based on our rankings and based on what they say, but it's very limited upside in my opinion. We both have him at number 33. What do you think on Julian?
I think that's appropriate for where for what that offense is going to likely be capable of. I don't know what their plan is out there. And that's a big question mark for me. I've always shied away from a lot of any like offense that Bill Belichick is operating because, you don't know what to expect out of it. Usually it's been years since you could point at it and say, oh yeah, they're a great pass offense, or yeah, they've got some great running backs who you can bet which guy is going to start. Like, it's just too many question marks. And that's the way Bill Belichick wants to run that offense. He wants other teams to be confused as to what to expect, but it's hard to deny who Julian Edelman is. He's third in targets last year, seventh in target rate. He was fourth in receptions, 16th in receiving yards, 13th in completed air yards. So his yak wasn't up to snuff with his receiving yards, but he was still 18th in yards after the catch.
Right.
Fifth in red zone targets. I mean, these are all elite numbers, right? And then he's going to have Jarrett Stidham as his QB. Another thing about Edelman was that he actually finished sixth in drops last year.
Really?
Yeah, he had a half a drop per game.
That's kind of shocking for him.
It is shocking, right? This is the guy who had that double clutch catch in the
Super
Super
Bowl,
Bowl, right?
in my head right now.
Yeah. So for me, I'm not gonna pay for him probably. Period, man. I could take him 12th pick of the 7th round, and I could probably be happy. But there's just too many question marks there. Now I can't see myself taking a guy who, he's returned elite numbers, but he just lost the reason that he returned elite numbers. And I can't see them striking lightning, getting lightning to strike twice on QB here and having Stidham turn into the second coming.
Of
so
who? Hashtag Twommy.
Hashtag immunity pills.
All right. So let that one down.
No, we're not. All right. So we've got coming in at number 34. We have Marvin Jones, wide receiver 40 on Fantasy Football Calculator, pick 10 in the 8th round. So we've got him higher than they do. So
this is, I will say, my favorite guy that we have done throughout our wide receiver rankings when it comes to what his Fantasy Football Calculator ADP is and what I think he can be this year. So let me give you a little information on him. Before his ankle injury,
sell me.
I'm going to sell you right here, man. I really think I will. Hopefully I won't sell you too hard. I don't want you drafting him before I do. So before his ankle injury.
Let me write that down.
Yeah, write that down.
Write that down.
Before the ankle injury, he was wide receiver 12. And you might ask yourself, is that a small sample size? It was weeks 1 through 14.
He dropped off that bad in 2 weeks?
No, he just got hurt after the ankle injury. He was put on IR, I believe. So he had 7 touchdowns last year. He was on pace for 9. He had 15 red zone targets. So that's tied for 14th, and that was only in 13 games. So one thing I really like to see was whenever him, Kenny Golladay, and Danny Amendola were on the same field at the same time, 12 games total, they all hovered around 20% target share. So I don't know why Danny Amendola is getting 20%, but that's neither here nor there. But I think he's criminally undervalued, Kyle. I mean, you bring back a healthy Matt Stafford. Hopefully he's not going to get broken in half. I think he could finish as a high-end wide receiver too. I know that's some lofty goals, but I
don't disagree.
Yeah, I mean, so it sounds like I might have sold him a little bit for you. I mean, but he's got some durability issues.
That's the thing. You don't have to sell him to me. So
he had some durability issues. 3 last year, 7 the previous year. But I mean, if you can get him as wide receiver 3 or flex, you're good.
Yeah. So dirty secret time. I've had Marvin Jones. Marvin Jones and Kenny Golladay on the same team, and I've started both of them before. And that's because Marvin Jones is a TD machine.
Yeah.
This dude catches targets in the red zone, and he puts in crazy numbers. He was 3rd in total TDs last year.
Yeah.
He was 9th in red zone receptions. He was 19th in fantasy points. I mean, you just look all over the place, and the numbers just show up for him. That offense was middle of the road in pass plays per game, right? And that was without Matt Stafford.
Mr. 5,000 yards, right? Like that's like you can bank on nearly 5,000 yards. They want Matt Stafford to throw 5,000 yards.
Trademark,
Yeah.
Mr. 5,000.
Yeah, Mr. 5,000. And you know, the returns that you get from Marvin Jones are insane based on like the fact that the value is there. People let him tumble. They don't understand it. I don't know why. He was dominant in a lot of ways as wide receiver 2 paired up across from AJ Green in Cincinnati for years.
Yeah.
And they let him get to Detroit, and he's done nothing but be the same. I mean, he
Bengals made a mistake. Bengals let someone walk.
I don't know.
No.
You should. Let's fact check that one. Let's write that one down. We'll have Trump
hashtag fact check.
Yeah, we'll let Trump and Twitter have a check on that one. There.
Yeah.
All right, but yeah. So like, you know, you're going to get some solid stuff out of him. Last year, he was 32nd in receptions, 36th in receiving yards. His completed air yards were actually 24th. So he was wide receiver 2 territory in there. So as a wide receiver 3, I think you're getting a great value. And nobody's looking at him as a wide receiver 3 right now. And a lot of people, he doesn't have that name cachet. I mean, literally, the name Marvin Jones is pretty plain when it comes to the NFL, right? So he just doesn't have that name cachet. And a lot of guys are going to let that fall down the board. I would take Marvin Jones ahead of a lot of guys who are going to get drafted ahead of him. And so you can sit back, let him fall, and you can take him later and feel confident that you just snagged somebody who's wide receiver 3 and potential for a wide receiver 2. You really can. He can return those weeks. He can even turn in wide receiver 1 weeks.
Yeah.
It was always frustrating. He would steal so many TDs from Kenny Golladay. Like Kenny Golladay would end up getting like 100 yards or 99 yards on a drive, right? And then the last pass into the end zone is to Marvin Jones. I can't even tell you how many times that would happen if you're just sitting with like Kenny Golladay. So
you sound like you're over it, Kyle. I mean, you sound like you're not bitter at all anymore.
No, not at all. You know me. I'm never bitter.
No, you never hold a grudge.
Never.
What we got next?
All right. So next we have Will Fuller coming in at 35. He's wide receiver 28 on Fantasy Football Calculator, and he's the second pick of the 6th round over there.
Okay. Still a little stiff. I mean, based off what we see him at 35 for Mr. Will Fuller, I think the 4th. I think that's what his jersey says. But I feel like he's always been the story of what ifs with him. I mean, he's missed 34% of the Texans games since he came in the league. He missed 5 last year.
Hard pass.
He's headed into his 5th year. So, I mean, once again, final year of the contract. I am kind of surprised that they picked up that 5th-year option for, him being a, number 1 or first-round pick. Kind of surprised, but here's the thing.
Who else are they going to throw to?
Well, I mean, they actually have a few guys now that they just decide to throw a bunch of numbers at, some money at. I'm going to get to it.
They used to have one guy. And that's all they needed.
That's all they needed, and they decided to, trade him for peanuts. So I will say this. I mean, when Will Fuller is healthy, I mean, he can perform at a high level. It's just when is that going to happen? So 9 full games Fuller played last year, he ranked 13th best wide receiver. So he actually, in those 9 full games, he actually handled a similar target share to the guy we were just kind of, talking about, DeAndre Hopkins. So they kind of played 1A, 1B whenever they're both on the field. So we all know what the actual talent is between those two. So, but Hopkins is gone. They decided to trade for Brandon Cooks. I mean, this is 20th team in 5 years. They traded for Kenny Stills last year as well.
He's gone now, though, isn't he?
No, I think he's still there.
No, I think he's a free agent. They've talked about trading him. That's what it is. There's talk that he's going to get traded.
But they signed your guy Randall Cobb, 3-year, $27 million. Holy crap for Randall Cobb. No offense.
I remember when he got 4 years, $40 million, like 20 years ago.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah.
And this guy, I always liked the name. I mean, it was probably just the name, Kiki Cutie. I mean, he's got a good name.
The same guy.
But he's performed when he was healthy too. He's had
Yeah.
the same kind of hamstring issues. So, I mean, I do think he has more potential than any of those guys we just mentioned. So, once again, it's a what if. I mean, I would prefer to draft Fuller if I actually do as a wide receiver 4 and kind of use him in that flex spot when he's healthy. So that's what I think on him. I got him at 36. You get him at 35, so we're not too far off. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan.
Yeah.
I'm not a huge fan of this offense in general. Like Deshaun Watson, he's solid. He's going to turn in elite numbers for you. But he's not necessarily separating himself from the pack in the QB ranks. Like he's top half, so he's valuable in that respect, but he's not going to make or break games for you the way that other QBs can. So, he can turn in massive games, but he also turns in a lot of mediocre games too.
Yeah.
His floor is pretty high. So he's got that going for him. But as far as how that relates to Will Fuller, yeah, I think you're going to see an uptick in receptions and targets and all that. And that's why we've got him in wide receiver 3 territory. Last year, he was a wide receiver 4 in those regards. And I mean, just receiving yards, receptions, completed air yards, yards after catch, red zone targets, all these things. He was wide receiver 4 territory, pushing backwards even to wide receiver 5 territory. But he was on the edge of wide receiver 3 for fantasy points because he just managed to eke it out. And that's partly because his average targeting distance was wide receiver 1 territory. He was 12th overall in average targeting distance. So when he would catch the ball, it was a deep pass. So he wasn't getting a high volume. He was across from DeAndre Hopkins, right? But it was a deeper pass. But he is another drop issue guy. He was 18th in the league in drops. His drop rate was 11th. So that's pretty problematic in my mind for a guy who's supposed to be going in and becoming a wide receiver 1, right? Like that's why they let go of DeAndre Hopkins, right?
Do we really know why they let go of DeAndre Hopkins, though?
They had to have felt secure in some extent.
Yeah.
Right. They had to have.
Right.
He's entering his 5th year. You don't want to see this sort of drop issue in a guy going into his 5th year. In his 4th years having rookie style drop numbers, right? Like that's not what you want in a guy who's going to be a wide receiver 1, according to the team. So I think he is a back end wide receiver 3, and that's where I'm going to leave him. So okay.
We agree. That's for sure.
I can see him falling out of there during the course of the season, going to wide receiver.
I do hope his hamstrings hold together. I mean, that's what he's always been plagued by because, like I said, when he's on the field, he's damn good. He just can't hold it together. Yeah, what's the last one, Kyle?
All right, so at 36, we have Marquise Brown, Hollywood.
Hollywood.
He is ranking at wide receiver 29 on Fantasy Football Calculator, 3rd pick of the 6th round. And, I mean, I think some of this stuff is just like, if a dude gets a nickname, people are dumb about it, right? Like,
all right, we got our one of our episodes coming up now. We got nickname episode and overvalued nickname episode. That's for sure. Yeah. So Hollywood Brown, 2nd year. I mean, dang, talk about a start to the rookie year though. First game, let's just go 4 catches, 147 yards, 2 touchdowns. I'll just be the 4th best wide receiver that first week. And then let's go ahead and have the rest of the weeks of the season. So weeks 2 through 16, ranked 54th.
Yeah.
Not good.
Yeah, there was a rush to the waiver wire on that.
Oh, was there? I mean, that was across the board. He might have been drafted in some leagues, but I don't know about you, but he probably wasn't drafted in that many leagues, even with being a first-round pick, because I believe he had some injury issues right at the beginning. So,
isn't he also like Antonio Brown's cousin or something?
Could be.
I think he's related to Antonio Brown. I'm pretty sure he is.
Well, hopefully none of the other issues that Brown has gone through relates to him. So One thing that has been good for Marquise Brown last year was his touchdown percentage. I mean, outstanding, 10.1%, second out of all wide receivers. That's bound to regress, though, Kyle. That has to regress. I mean, that's just hard to maintain. So I do see him kind of increasing his targets, so he didn't really have that many last year. I mean, he is the number one wide receiver in this offense, but it's a run-heavy team. It's a run-heavy offense.
It's the run-heavy team.
It is. I mean, we've talked off air about how they want to not run Lamar as much.
Yeah.
Less design runs for him, so maybe that means more routes for Mark.
But didn't they draft a running back? So
they did. J.K. Dobbins. So
yeah.
But another thing that scares me, of course, is the dude's 5'9", 170.
Yeah.
Granted, I have zero muscle on me. I am 5'9", 170. I could not imagine playing NFL football. So, I mean, if he sniffs 100-plus targets, then he does have that wide receiver 3 with upside. Ding, ding, ding. But
yeah,
that's a big if. So I got him at 37. You have him at 34. What do you think on Hollywood?
He's a back-end wide receiver 3 for me for a very solid reason, and that is that this offense doesn't throw.
No.
It doesn't. Yeah, they want to throw more. Are they going to? I don't know. They were 32nd in the league. They're last in the league at pass plays per game. He was 59th in targets. He had 71 targets last year, but he was 36th in deep targets. So everything thrown to him was pretty much a deep target. He was 13th in total TDs. So that was the only thing that really salvaged his season for him. He had a lot of red zone receptions. And so when you pull these things together, that's what made his year. His yards per route, he was running deep routes. He was 25th in the league in yards per route. So when you pull these things together, it's not going to result in a guy who is going to – he might win a game here or there for you, but it's got to be like that week 1 phenomenon where he broke two plays open for like 80-yard touchdowns or something, if I remember correctly. And it was crazy.
Can you trust him to be a starting wide receiver in your lineup?
I have serious questions about that. In the early part of the year, I don't know if I can do that. A lot of his statistics show up as wide receiver 4 or worse. There are very few things that he had that had him even sitting as a wide receiver 2 in any sort of category. And I don't see this offense really changing much to suit improving his chances and his numbers and providing, a better opportunity for him. I just don't see that happening. It's unfortunate because I think he does have talent. I think, we've mentioned this before. There are a few guys that they're just sitting in a situation that is a hindrance to them, and there's just nothing they can do about that. And so he's got metrics that are decent, but I think they're all relative. That they all have a ceiling. That ceiling is they don't want to throw that ball. They were throwing it 29.3 pass plays per game. That's it. So, and he wasn't getting a ton of targets out of that. Like he was getting 5.1 targets per game. So he's getting 1/6 of that. And people are going to treat him as a wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2. They're going to draft him as a wide receiver 2 and think that they can get him as that he's a wide receiver 1 coming to them. So I don't see that happening. I really, really don't. And so I think he's going to be lucky to return wide receiver 3 numbers.
Yeah. What was his ADP again, Kyle?
He's wide receiver 29 going in the 6th round. I'm not taking him in the 6th round.
No, we will let anybody or everybody that wants to draft him there go. Yeah. Feel free. Go right ahead.
I'm looking at him hopefully fall into the back of the 7th round.
You're just taking a flyer at that point.
Yeah. With my strategy, because there's other guys I'd take ahead of him. And with my strategy, he's going to be somebody that I'm looking at as, well, do I want that depth piece who has an upside that if this offense magically changes, sure, great, wonderful. Or am I going to take, a guy who's a potential RB4 or maybe a tight end who is my first tight end off the board?
Right.
Because at the back of the 7th round, I'm starting to consider where I want to get my tight end. Because I like to aim for them between 8 and 10 sometimes. So, that's just it leaves a lot of question marks for me. And this offense is just not something I want a piece of necessarily, other than Lamar Jackson. And our league's a keeper league, and that guy's gone already. So, yeah.
Hey, look at us, Kyle. We made it through wide receiver 1 through 3 in 1 week.
Yeah.
Look at us.
There we go. All right, so let's go ahead and get this thing closed out then.
Yep.
So you're already watching us on YouTube. We're at the Fantasy Football Upside. You can see us on Twitter. We'll talk to you. We'll respond to you. It's mostly going to be Justin probably. But we are at FFB_Upside. And you can find us on Facebook at FFB Upside. There's no underscore on that one. Or you can search for the Fantasy Football Upside. And you can also reach us via email at thefantasyfootballupside@gmail.com. We're working on getting more content out to you every day. We're working on this stuff, and we're going to try to, improve as we go, obviously, right? And we'll announce when we've got special stuff coming out. And like I mentioned in our last episode, we are working on our victory draft kit. We'll let you know when that is available. And hopefully we'll have a site up here soon, and you can sign up through email to get early notification for it. And then don't forget to subscribe and, click that bell, get notifications so that you can find out when we upload the best fantasy football information on the internet, guys. Thanks again for being a fan of the Upside, and we will see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.